All right, I see more and more people have joined. I think we don't need to wait any longer, so let's kick it off. Welcome everyone again to our brand owner interview series on how to build and grow your brand on Amazon. This is the second out of 3 interviews we are hosting together with the brand Supportivac. And today it will be all about ways to grow your brand on Amazon. We will specifically talk about 2 ways. The first one will be how to grow sales of your existing product portfolio, and the second one will be how to develop and launch new products. And I will pick Santi's brain on all these things. So welcome, Santi, to
Thank you, Jana.
this interview. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana.
So, and for all of you guys who have not seen the face of this guy yet, I will officially introduce him again like I did last time. So, Santi is one of our selling partners and co-founder of the brand Supportivac. He founded the brand Supportivac together with 2 of his friends back in 2016. And since then, they are selling their brands on the Amazon marketplace. What kind of products are they selling? It's all kinds of products that provide instant back pain relief. And what can I say? It seems to be working quite well, as they are selling around 3,000 to 5,000 units per day of their brand Supportivac. And this is only one of the reasons they probably got awarded as best new release by the Amazon Accelerate conference last year. So Santi, I'm happy to do this interview today with you.
Likewise.
So let's start right in. So Santi, the first question in the first interview was all about how it started, how the brand was born. But today we're more talking about how the brand came where it is today. So could you briefly tell us where you are at the moment with the brand Supportivac and how it's looking like?
Look, the Supportivac has gotten to the point where it's achieved global reach in what we call the major Amazon marketplaces. There's still a few that we still have to expand to, and we're reaching more customers a day than we ever thought. For us, is now about how do we extend the lifetime journey of that customer over time, and how do we make them come back and add value in different points of their life. And I think every brand owner wishes to be in this stage, because the hardest thing is actually when you have a good product that's already adding value but not reaching as many people. So consider ourselves very lucky to be at this stage.
Cool. So now we're going to ask everything to understand how you actually got there. So maybe an overall question first. So when you say what have been the main ways in which you have grown Supportivac, or what would you say would be the main ways in which you can grow a brand on Amazon?
So I always talk about there's like three different core ways from a very high level that you can expand a brand. The first one is to grow the existing product in the existing marketplace. And it sounds a little bit silly, but it's just grow that product sales. And I'll get into that later on. But the second one is launch more products. So look at your customer. That's the stage that we're the place that we're spending the most time focusing on right now at this stage. And it's seeing where are the points in time can you add value. And the third one is to expand into new markets. And I'll dive in a little bit deeper for each one of them. So in order to grow the sales, what you really have to focus on is what is your conversion rate and what is the amount of people that are looking at your product. So think about like impressions is a good place to start. And then conversion rate, I think about it as a holistic, right, from the very beginning to the very end. If you really want to get technical, for the technical people out there, you have click-through rate and then session conversion. But the key thing there is how to become more efficient, and how to become more efficient in the people that are looking at your product. So that think about how do you go into PPC and hyper obsess about the type of keywords that you're bidding, the type of customer that you're going after, and also descaling or shutting down the campaigns that are not targeted properly and that are not getting you the right people in the door, and then hyper obsessing on your listing and the product offering. So that's price and features to get the people through the funnel. Right. The second thing is launch more products. I always try to say, like, until you don't get to 25 sales a day on a specific product, don't move to the next stage. There's still a lot to be done. And this is, you can apply this to almost any category, because Amazon is so big that if you're not selling 25 units a day on a product, you still have a long way to go. in terms of like good positive runway. Once you've reached that point, now all you have to do is do that more than once, right? If you do 25 products a day, I think average price $25, and you do that 3 times, you've got yourself $1 million business. It's really that simple, right? So step 2 is more products. One of the key things that I always say is think about your customer, don't think about your supplier. I think key issue that most initial sellers do is like, oh, I have a supplier that does this other product, but the type of customer that uses that product is a completely different customer. So in our case, we went from doing a brace to doing a pillow. And actually, you know, pillows are done by very different people because those are done by people that work with memory foam, whereas a brace you're done with people that work with straps and other like seat belt type materials, and there's a different type of manufacturer. But for us, it was really important to target that same customer. So then we created a pillow, a lumbar brace, right? Other products that were geared around people with back pain. And then Amazon has this whole set of tools. Like one of them is like the virtual bundles. You can go and create virtual bundles where you say, hey, buy a lumbar brace and the pillow at the same time and get it for a better price, more efficient shipping. And then Amazon, there's a whole bunch of like, we call it black box at Amazon. Amazon starts to detect these patterns. They say, okay, I get it. Somebody comes in, they buy a pillow, they trust and support eBack as a brand, and then they're likely to buy then another product if they had a good experience. So they'll start suggesting your other products, and that's what we call the halo effect, where one sale of a product is benefiting the sale of other products. So that's stage 2. Once you get to that, and if you do that 3 times, it's really not that hard to do it 3 times. Like you've got yourself $1 million business. It's really that simple. The first time I heard that, I said, this must be a scam. It can't be true. But I can tell you it's certainly, and then obviously if you do 30, you got yourself a $10 million business, right? Not all of them are going to be successful launches. You're going to have some learnings along the way. We failed a few products, but the vast majority will probably be successful, especially once you do it right the first time. You'll understand how to do it right the next few times. And then the last thing, and perhaps I would even do that along with the first one, is grow into new markets, right? The thing is, you need a specific, like you need to get to a point where it makes sense to launch a new market. If you're selling 1 product a day, it doesn't make sense to do a new market. Amazon is making that point lower and lower with time because it makes it easier. Like it used to be that if you wanted to sell, you know, in Europe, you had to go and have an independent supply chain in each country. Now you can just do it all together, right? So it's like what I always call, like, Amazon is lowering the playing field and making it more competitive and allowing the small seller to compete with the big guys. So expanding new marketplaces, Amazon makes it really easy if you're in the US to do Canada and Mexico. If you're in Europe, it makes it really easy to go to the rest of the European countries. If you're in UK, it also makes it really easy to expand to Germany and the rest. So just to summarize, there's 3 things. Grow the existing sales by hyper obsessing on conversion rate and impressions, or pay-per-click, and the people that look at your listing. Number 2 is launch more products. Do it 3 times, 25 products, 25 sales a day, and you got yourself $1 million business. And expand to new markets once you reach a minimum level of scale.
Thank you, Santi, for the insights. And we need to stop here and talk a little bit more in detail about the things to really understand how it is, or how to make this easy, or as easy as you say it is. So we will today be focusing on the first 2 things you have mentioned: growing sales of existing products and launching new and more products. For the last point you have mentioned, expanding to new markets, just as an information for everyone listening, this will be the main topic of the 3rd interview we are hosting mid of March. So that will be all about how to expand globally to new markets, to new regions, what you have to take into consideration when doing that, or when willing to do that. So Santi, let's start with the first pillar you were talking about: grow existing product sales. So when you look at it, this is probably a very huge question, and you have provided some information on this already, but can you go a little bit more into detail on how you did it? I mean, you were talking about PPC, which is short for pay-per-click, but you also mentioned some other things, so maybe for the audience to understand a bit better.
Yeah, so the first thing you need to start is, again, with the who. Who is it that you're targeting? So when you're day 0, and this is for the person that hasn't made the first unit in sales, you don't have any data. You have nothing to work with. So what I would rely on there is think like, who did you make this product for? Are there any similar products out in the market, and who are they going after? What's the type of customer they're going after? It might be that your product is the same type of product, but it goes after a different type of customer, right? Because within the same category, you have different types of shopper, right? So that I would take that as the initial guiding principle, and then start to think, what does that customer look for? And the classic example I always say is like when you go to the supermarket and you're buying ham, you've got 50 different offerings of ham. You've got organic ham, you've got the one that was raised in green pasture, the one that was raised in a factory, the one that's smoked, the one that's not smoked. And although they're all in the same category, they're targeting way different customers. The organic shopper is probably a more affluent shopper who's more environmentally conscious and has different types of worries than the guy who wants just the smoked, most tasty ham, right? So it's sort of the same thing. And the keywords and the searches are going to be different. The person looking for organic ham is going to book organic ham, like a nature conscious or whatever the qualifier is. So when you start to create the first pay-per-click campaigns, because the first issue is you need to get people through the door. Even if you have a highly converting product, people don't see it, you're not going to sell it to anyone. It's get to like hone in on those initial long tail keywords. Long tail means very specific keywords. So if you're selling ham, going after the keyword ham is very hard because you're going to have every ham seller going after that keyword. But if you're selling an organic ham and you put an organic ham, you're now only competing with a subset of sellers who are only doing organic ham. And then you can continue that process to very specific, right, what your product is. So start with specificity, start with long tail, and then work your way up as you gain more volume, right? Because in the end, you do want to compete with the biggest ham sellers. And whether it's ham or something else, it's the same analogy, right? So that's how you get the first people in the door. Now, if you're already selling and even if you've got a few sales a day, you already have some data to work with. So go back and start seeing where are these people coming from? Who can you attribute this traffic to, right? What keywords were they looking when they bought? And then reverse engineer that and then do more advertising and target on PPC to that type of customer, to those type of keywords. And then also craft your listing for that type of customer. And you actually learn a few things. Who you might have thought was your customer might have been a different customer. You might have thought, okay, organic people are like older people who are more affluent, and it turns out maybe the younger people are the ones looking for organic ham. So once you start seeing those patterns, is craft the listing. So what does that mean? Put organic ham in your in your title. Put organic ham in your bullet points. Explain in a feature set in the bullet point list why your ham is differentiated in an organic way from the other non-organic hams, right? So hone in on that messaging. And the thing is, when you do these changes, then always test, right? I always say, like, you think you might have the right answer, but it actually sometimes is counterintuitive, and we have avid debates internally. We're like, this is the better design or this is a better feature, and we tested it. Almost always it's the weirdest or less expected answer. So there's like a manage your experiments tab on Amazon. You used to have to do that manually, but now it's all automated, and you can start seeing which ones work a little bit better, right? So once you've got the wheel spinning, you've got people looking at your listing, you're optimizing your content through experiments. You can start tracking KPIs and then seeing which, when am I getting a higher conversion rate? What am I getting a higher conversion rate? If I drop the price, what's the optimal price point? And then the last thing you need to do is then just keep the market engaged. So deals is a really good way to do that. There's been thousands of studies, like people like deals, people like to feel like they got the cheapest price, and Amazon has a really good reputation that when they're showing a lightning deal or a deal of the day, it truly means that it's the cheapest price. So take advantage of that feature as much as you can and stimulate the market. And then it also helps you regulate your supply demand. If you're oversupply, you can run more deals. If you are short in stock, then run less deals and kind of get a bit of you can fine tune your demand that way.
Okay, so I want to dive deeper into some of the points you have mentioned because some of them are very interesting. So regarding the point on content optimization, you have talked about keywords, and at this point I can actually use one of the submitted questions that came from the audience on keywords, who are asking, okay, should I use the same keywords for sponsored products campaign that I'm also using in the back end of a listing, that I'm also using in the titles, if you have just mentioned? Are those the same keywords or should they be different? And how do I find out about those keywords?
Look, so a lot of the people, and I sympathize with this because I was also trying to figure it out. I was like trying to think how Amazon thinks, like how does the algorithm really work, and should I try to do more keywords, right, and less repetition, or more repetition and less keywords and hone it in? The real answer is I don't know, but the way that I go about it is I try to think about the customer and then reverse engineer that, right? when you go and you buy something on Amazon and you see a listing, do you want to see the same keyword being repeated 20 times for the sake of being repeated? Probably not. So what you want to make sure is that the keywords, the main keywords are there at least once. So if you're selling organic ham, make sure that's the first thing that shows up in your title, organic ham, and put it in the back end, right? Do you need to repeat organic ham in every single bullet point? Absolutely not. Make the bullet points about why your product is better, why like this organic makes it slightly better. But try to add then in the bullet point or also in the title and the back end different variations of the same thing. So maybe people don't look for organic ham, but they look for natural ham, or they might have looked for USDA ham, right? Or there's different types of variations that some of which you can't even come up with yourself, which is why you have to then look at the keyword report, because that's going to give you suggestions. Like one thing I found out early on is like orthopedic has like 3 different ways of spelling it, and they're all correct. And I think in German there's like another 4, because it depends on if you actually use the 2 dots on top of the U, and like so it's really intricate, and that's why you need to look at your keyword reports and then use that as a guiding principle. Make sure that the different ways of people searching your product are somewhere in your listing or the back end. Amazon will pick up on it and will understand, and Amazon is getting smarter about this, right? So even over time, even if you don't have all the variations of the different names in your listing, Amazon understands, okay, these are different ways of spelling the same thing. I know they're still looking for this, and they'll still show your product. So less about gaming the system. That's like old 2010 days. It's more about truly making the best listing that differentiates your product against the one next to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have talked about this a lot in the first interview already on how to optimize your product detail page, that you should also use A+ content available for brand owners, put a video to not only an image, but also a video to your product listing to make it better. You also shared some tips on title and bullet points, so people can watch that again in the recording. But coming now to the Manage Your Experiments tool that you have just mentioned, I would like to understand, are you using that really for every single ASIN? Or are you doing it only for your best-selling products? And maybe you can also quickly explain the audience again what the tool does, so everyone understands.
Yeah, so what Manage Your Experiment does is and this is like, it's also referred to as A/B testing or split testing. What they do is essentially they put side by side 2 different versions of your listing. So for example, you might have a first image where your product is slanted left, or where your product is slanted right, where it has a different lighting on the product. So Amazon will shuffle that randomly amongst different customers. So one customer is never going to see both versions. They're only going to see one version. So to the customer, it's a seamless experience. But to you, say you get 100 people that look at your listing a day, 50 random people are going to look at one, 50 random people are going to look at the other. And then you're going to see if the results are statistically significant to favor the conversion of one. So what that means is, can you tell from a mathematical standpoint if one listing is better than the other? And the math that happens on the back end is a little bit complicated. There's some like statistical significance statistics behind it, which you don't necessarily have to understand. Amazon makes it a little bit easy for you. But what Amazon is going to try to say, or what the A/B test is going to try to say, is, can we say with a degree of confidence of X, generally that's 80 to 90%? That's my suggestion, if one is better than the other. Now, in order to get to that point, you need a lot of people to go through the listing. So that's why I said you can run a Manager of Experiment, but if you don't have any customer, you have only a few a day that see it, you're not going to get the statistical significant result that you need. So the first thing is get people through your door and then start testing, right? So we tested every listing, but precisely for that problem, the listings that are up and coming, which are often the ones that need more optimization, they don't have enough people to go through the door. So those tests take a little bit longer to run. So what I generally do is we make a list of every test that we want to run, and we rank them by 2 things. One is, what is their ease of implementation? So how easy it is for me to come up with this other version, right? If I have to pay hundreds of dollars to do photography, like, not worth it. If it's just a slight different picture, I already have the picture, that's very easy. And then the second thing is odds of success. Sorry, there's 3 things. Odds of success, how likely do you think this is going to be successful? And then 3, the impact of that success, right? So you might think, okay, this product, this image is slightly better than this one, is almost, but then the impact is only 2%, right? So we rank all those 3, and then we say, okay, which one has the highest score and there's 3, and that's the one I'm going to test first. So you're generally going to get the lowest hanging fruits and the lowest hanging fruits and the best results up front. So another thing that I usually do is once I have more than one listing, is you start testing things in one listing and you come up with what we call best practices. So that's going to guide the list for the next experiment. We say almost always, every time I've increased the size of the main image, I've gotten a lift in conversion. So the odds of success when you put the score is very high. So when you go and test it for the next product, even though it has very low volume, you'll probably get a result a lot quicker and say, okay, cool. And the funny thing is, the better the results, the higher the conversion rate gets. So Amazon ranks you better, so then you get more people, and then you get in this flywheel where you get more people, you test more, then you know, and it continues on forever, right? So anyway, those would be my suggestions. Test everything, but you do need to get minimal critical mass up front. There's other things you can do if you don't have any this is one of the biggest secrets early on, is if you don't have many people to go through your listing, there's other services out there. There's one called PickFu, where you can pay a very small fee, like maybe 10 cents per image, where they'll put both images side by side and they'll show it to a whole bunch of people and say, which one do you prefer? And you don't tell PickFu or the people which is your product. They just put two different, a competitor versus you, and then people click on the one they like. So that generally gives you a suggestion in your early days if people like a feature versus another feature. So that's a little trick when you're getting started.
Thanks for sharing, Santi. Really helpful for everyone, I think. And you were mentioning earlier also the word flywheel, and that actually fits to what you were also talking about deals. And could you tell us how often you are participating in deals? Are you only participating in deal events, or are you doing it between deal events as well? And what kind of deals are you running?
We do all of the above. We do lightning deals on a very regular basis. We think that the customer at Amazon really trusts that. It helps us get a lot of data. So another thing is, like, when you're running managed by experiment, you run a deal, that increases the amount of people that look at the listing, so you get a result a lot quicker. That's like a little tip. So I do run a lot of deals. We also do event deals. Those you have to prepare ahead of time, because there's nothing economically worse than running a big deal in an event and running out of stock, because they essentially sold all your units at a discount and then now you don't have any units. So those things you have to prepare ahead of time. So for Prime Day, all those big days, make sure you order a lot more. Make sure you send into Amazon a lot more early on to prepare for that day. And if you don't have, so another thing is, like, don't make the mistake just because you have the deal, don't necessarily run it. If you don't have the inventory to run it, don't run it. It's better to sell your products at full price, get some full paying customers, than to run the deal. But on the inverse, if you have way too much stock, then it's a great way to decrease your inventory levels without losing money.
Yeah, I think that's actually a very important point you're making. Generally, when you're running campaigns and advertising, more and more people get aware of your product and might buy your product, and then the chance to run out of stock quicker is high. Do you have any tips to avoid that, or how are you planning ahead?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to forecast, and I think even the most experienced mathematicians will say it's almost impossible to get it right every time. One thing that we did early on, Amazon really likes high throughput in FBA, so they don't like to store your products for 2 years, right? It's not the business. The idea is you send it to them and then they ship it to the customer in 2 days. So one thing that we did early on was we sent the demand that we thought was going to be enough to cover our sales to Amazon, but then we sent a little bit more to, in the beginning it was our college dorm, then it became a warehouse, but to a place that we control, and you have that as a reserve. So if Amazon, if you're doing deals and this demand was a lot higher than you predicted, then you can immediately react and send more inventory into Amazon. That's something that we did early on to navigate the storage constraints from FBA, because the FBA is overloaded and they're trying to keep up with sales, so they're trying to optimize for high running products, things that go through quickly through their warehouses. So that would be one tip. The other tip is, like, look, you will run out of stock. A lot of people are also, like, I think we early on in college, like, we were very afraid of making a big investment because, like, there's no way this is gonna sell. people underestimate the size of Amazon. Like, you know, our first run was 100 units, and we sold that in 4 days. We didn't even think that was possible. So be confident in yourself and your product, and make orders that are big enough to cover your sales. Amazon really values when you don't run out of stock. They say, this is a reliable seller, this is a reliable product, we want to rank you. So just keep that in mind. But it's really hard. Like, we run out of stock all the time. It happens every time.
Thanks for sharing, Santi. Cool. I would now jump over to the next growth pillar, the second one you have talked about, which is a very interesting one, launching and developing new products. So on that topic, yeah, how do you find out about the products you want to develop in the first place, and how do you handle this?
Yeah, it's a really hard question. And there's a lot of noise out there, and like, what's the best technique? So a couple of things. Like, the first thing I do is get back to the who. Is like, who is the customer? And there's a few ways to understand that. One is literally just find out who they are and give them a call. Hey, I want to learn from you. Like, how can I? And Amazon has some policies, again, like, to prevent that. But if a customer reaches out, say, to your customer service, you can talk to them and be like, hey, I want to learn, where did you have a bad experience? How can I make it right? And then it's a good opportunity to learn what type of customer they are. The second thing is reviews. Reviews are the best way that the customer is talking back to you. I think most people obsess over the reviews because, like, their metric of success. But it's actually, like, when we get a bad review, we see that we're very grateful that that's there, because that person maybe refunded their product. We didn't get their business anymore. If the review wasn't there, we've never found out. So then the next person comes in, they have the same negative experience. So we take it as a good opportunity to learn from the customer, and that's usually when the most information is voiced. So those two ways are important. And then the third thing is just brand analytics, which is fairly new. We're still learning how to use the full potential, but it does tell you a bit of who's the who behind the product, and what things are they looking at, what things are they searching. So those things are important, but don't forget it's a person. Like, I think often when people go online, they get lost in the technicalities, and like, there's a human behind this that is having a problem that you're solving, right? If you're selling ham, maybe the next thing to sell is cheese, right? Not to sell another type of ham, because the person is making a sandwich, so they want the ham, they want the cheese, they want the butter, they want the bread. So think about those things, even though the suppliers are different. Yeah, I would say those are the three things. You know, when you're getting started from zero, you can look at demand, you can see which people sell more, where the competition is high. I think that's missing the forest for the trees. Like, the competition, if a category has low competition, the competition will come over time. It is important to know that, because you're like, hey, if I can get a head start in this new category, that's great. But in the end, don't forget that you're serving a customer, the competition will come. You're gonna win not because you got there, you know, not because you found the perfect niche, but rather because you served the customer better within that niche than anyone else. So always keep that in mind. There were hundreds of backbin products when we started supporting back, hundreds. They all had thousands of reviews back then. We had 0, but we said we're going to make the best products. Initially, it was to solve our problem, then it was to solve our customer's problem. So yeah, so I would start there.
Cool. And you were talking about brand analytics. So for all listening, brand analytics, you can also find in Seller Central in the brands tab. There you have the brand analytics. It has different kind of reports. How regular are you looking into brand analytics? I would like to understand that, and how are you driving the conclusions from there?
Every time we launch a new product, we look at the brand through brand analytics as a core point of this of data. There's also pay-per-click. So brand analytics gives you the data on the entire product, right? Which is something that we didn't have back in the day. So we're still trying to learn what the full potential is. But the key thing between brand analytics and what we have to do is you get the whole spectrum of traffic. Back in the day, you can only get keyword search data, for example, only from the keywords that you're bidding on PPC. So you download the search term report from pay-per-click or headline search ads, and then you would go through and see what people were searching, and that would give you a bit of an idea of what direction to go. And now brand analytics also helps you with a bit of comparing with your top 3 competitors and see what they're doing. what kind of reviews they're getting, and how can you use that. And the first thing we did with Supporting Bag was download every review of every competitor that we had, and we put competitor A, this is their product, their specs, their dimensions. We went as far, Jana, as to we order their products, we cut the pillows in little squares, and we send them to China for sampling to find out what density they had of their foam. And then we looked through every review, and we said the ones that said, oh, this is too hard, we then looked at the density, and we're like, okay, anything that's over 60D is considered too hard. And then we looked at the ones that were under 40D, like all that has to be done manually. We went in, we like next, copy, paste, copy every review, then do keyword search matching. Anyway, it's really long. Nowadays, you can even go on a listing, and it says on the left side, these are the top 4 common complaints or praises to the product, right? And all the AI targeting and keyword matching is done by Amazon. And then brand analytics takes that a little bit further to the seller, where you just have it all in front of you. Anyway, I'm jealous of the sellers today, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, that really shows that obsessing over the quality and the customer really is key, right? All right, so now we heard a little bit more about how you get to knowing which kind of product you would like to launch, but then getting a little bit deeper into really launching a new product. Once you decide to launch a new product, what are the factors you are considering?
Yeah, so one thing is like, okay, I think we talked about this in the first session, but it's like for a very high level is one is, can I make a better product than the market at an equal or better price? That's like rule number 1. If you cannot make a better product at an equal or lower price, it is very hard for you to compete, because you're going to start against people who already have more history, more reviews, right? So once you get that, right, is then you start figuring out, like, in order to get it, you need to figure out all the economics. You have to go, and so there's brand analytics, I think, can help you with this now, but you can also just take the ASIN, copy paste the ASIN, and go into FBA calculator. Just Google Amazon FBA calculator. Amazon has its own tool. You paste the number in there. Amazon knows the dimensions and weights of those competitive products, so you can say, okay, my product is the same size as this one, this is going to be my typical fulfillment fee, right? Or you can say, hey, I can do a smaller one like this other competitor, and I can get a cheaper fulfillment fee and the features of this other guy, so I can do a better product. And you can start mixing and matching. But then you started to sort of reverse engineer like a P&L, like a profit and loss, right? What would be my potential selling price? What are the fees that Amazon's going to take? How much does it cost me to make this product? And then how much is left for me, right? We usually try to go for at least like 20-25% left over from that math, right? And that includes the commission, the FBA fee, and your cost of goods sold. That gives you enough buffer room for things that you might not be expecting, right? So with the COGS, the best way to do is just find out a lot of manufacturers. There's a lot of good platforms out there. It's really not that hard. I think when I was in school, the most intimidating part was getting the manufacturer. There's hundreds and hundreds of manufacturers. They all do the same few products. So you talk to 4 to 5 of them, pick the one that you think is the most reliable. Quality is what you're going after here, like not the price. Like don't take the 5% discount. Take the quality, take the reliability, because that's the difference between running out of stock and not running out of stock, or getting a bad review or not getting a bad review. So we hyper obsessed on that. So once you get the P&L right, then then you've got like 90% of the way there, right? Then you have to see like, how am I going to position it in the market? Look at the other competitors in the market. And for example, if you're back to the ham analogy, if your ham is the organic ham, then okay, how am I going to show that in the first image, right? How do I make sure that people understand? Maybe we show the packaging that says USDA organic, and I make sure that blue is very sharp, right? And then when people click on it, it's again, like, start working your way through there. I don't want to get again into detail there, the conversion optimization, but it's now that you've picked the features in the P&L, is set it up so that it stands out in the market. And if don't pick features that people don't care about. I think that's a classic mistake. You're making a product for somebody else, not for you. So you might care about a feature, but if somebody else doesn't care about it, you're adding cost to them that they don't care. And that's something that a competitor is not going to include, and then they're going to get a cheaper cost, and they're going to beat you to it. So build a product and build the P&L depending on what you take on the market, on that ultimate who customer that you're going after.
Very insightful. Thank you, Santi. Cool. So, and when you, so how do you assess the demand of the products you then develop and launch on Amazon?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the there's a lot of people, like a lot of the noise in this one, because there's a lot of tools out there that kind of, the third-party tools that try to gauge a bit of the demand. We've never used any tool from the outset. Amazon does something that's very open and transparent, which is it shows you the bestseller rank, also known as BSR, of every product. It's out there, it's public, you can see it. So don't confuse it with the Node bestseller ranking, right? So what that means is if you're selling ham, there's a category called ham. It's a product category, and Amazon does a ranking with all the hams, and you might be number 30 in the list of hams, right? But that's not the BSR. The BSR is the global categories. In this case, it would be groceries of ham, right? So the way you assess the demand depth and how much demand there is you see the lower that number, the bestseller rank is essentially ranking from 1 to infinity of who sells more units. It's not based on revenue, but rather units. So, the number 1 is the product that sells the most units in Amazon globally, and then it works your way down. So one thing that we look at is, is the number of the category leader low enough, right? And you can get a bit of an, so some tools do give you initial idea of what that number equals to in terms of units, but as you launch new products into the market, you'll get very used to that number, to the point that I already know in my head how many units 10,000 BSR in X category sells and 1,000 sells, because you, at any given point, your products are going to be somewhere in that curve, and you're going to start seeing how many units. Initially, there's a few tools out there, but the point is not just to look at the demand of the leader in the category, but rather to see the demand depth. So how's the number 8 doing? How's the number 9 doing and number 10 doing? Because if the number 1 has taken 80%, 90% of the category, you're not going to get enough customers to manage your experiments, to get reviews, to then beat that number 1, because they're just taking the entire market. Shallow demand depth is good because the number 10 might be selling 3% of the market, but that's enough to get you going, get some sales, get some reviews, manage some experiments, learn a little bit. Then you get to number 9, and now you're like maybe 10% market share, and so on and so forth. So those are the categories that are more ripe for newcomers. But again, like all these are like little tactics. I'm happy to go over them, but the who is always first, right? If your customer needs a pillow and the pillow has very bad demand depth, doesn't matter. That's what your customer needs. Like that always goes first, right? And then you can go on tactics. Tactics are always secondary to the strategy. It's very important to know that.
Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing these little tactics. And now I would actually like to come from all these little tactics you have shared to what have been the key lessons you learned, because we have talked about so many things now, and what is really key for you, and what advice could you give to brand owners starting to build and grow their brand on Amazon?
Yeah. So maybe the first one would be focus on the customer, right? So that's who you're selling to. Or maybe not focus on the customer, like think about the customer when you're developing or when you're doing all these strategies. Customer first. The second thing is focus on the product, and the product is always coupled with price. You can make a pillow that flies, but nobody wants to pay $10,000 for a pillow, right? So hyper obsess about that, and so start with a customer, hyper obsess about the product for that customer. And then I would say the last one is like be confident in the size. Like there's size out there. Even if you take a subsection of the organic ham, like you'd be surprised the amount of people who you're targeting and who you're going to ultimately reach. And I wish my first order wouldn't have been 100 units; it would have been 400 units, because we would have grown a lot faster. So being confident, I think it's important, and it'll also build the resiliency when it doesn't work. You might not get it right in the first immediate sale. We got really lucky, but just tweak. Maybe I change the image, maybe I bring a different keyword. So that confidence is like just believe that there's another side that's really, really big, and push through it. So summarize: start with a customer, focus on the product, and then be confident.
Experimenting and learning from it, and then going out there.
That's another one. Always experiment. Yes.
And you have just talked about price. So how do you know what is the right price for the customer? Are you only looking at competitors' offers and see what is the value of your product compared to that? Or how do you go about this?
So it's really hard, especially at the beginning, because you don't have the data. Like the computer scientist me would say, do dynamic A/B testing on pricing. So raise the price, lower the price, raise the price, lower the price, raise the price, lower the price by a little bit, and then you see if you raise it, you get a better profitability than when you lower it, or vice versa. But at the beginning, you don't have that data, and you can't do that. So the best thing I would do is like try to err on the side of equal price, better features than better features, better price. Although that's like a suggestion, not a rule, right? And then obviously like the intuitive sense, right? Look at all your competitors, what are they offering, what's their price? I think that entrepreneurs like myself, we tend to overvalue our own products because they're our baby. So we're like, oh yeah, I would totally pay $60 for this pillow. It's like, yeah, you would because you made it, it's your baby, but maybe somebody else wouldn't. So keep that in mind, and that's why I always say like err on the side of low rather than high. But always test. Like there's room for everything. There's room for $200 pillows that do really well on Amazon. Like who knows, right? So the beginning is intuition, and then in the end, it's just always testing.
Thank you, Santi. Very inspirational. And this was already the official part of the interview. Now we're coming to some of the pre-submitted questions that came from the audience. And one of them I have actually built in already. That was the one on the keywords. We have discussed that already. So thank you for that. There were other advertising related questions. So one was also, should I, as a new brand owner, only focus on Amazon advertising options that we have, like sponsored products, sponsored brands, and so on, or should I also go to other channels, promote on Facebook, Instagram, I mean, all the new social media channels out there?
Yeah. So
What is your opinion on this? Yeah.
Yeah. So Amazon has this new tool. Again, I'm always jealous because we didn't have any of these things back then. That's called attribution. So they'll give you back. They were actually launched in Accelerate 2021, the conferences when they announced the tool. It'll essentially they'll give you back 10% of the commission if you bring the customer from the outside. So that allows you to get more budget to go and advertise on Facebook, on Google, on other of the bigger platforms, and send people to Amazon. You have to use a special link so Amazon can track that customer and can attribute the sale to you. And so you brought this customer, we're not going to charge you 15%, we're only going to charge you 5% fee on this one. So the opportunity is there, and it's we've tested at a smaller scale, really good results. But I always say it's like stepping stones. It's better to be really good at one platform than to be so at all of them, right? It's like, playing tennis is very different than playing football. So focus on being Nadal first, and once you're Nadal, then you can go to the next one. So it's a bit of that, right? So I would start with sponsored products, the typical, what's usually known as PPC, and become really good at that. You're going to get the most amount of data and information from there, because you can't, Google, you have keyword targeting, but you don't really see the whole customer, through the, which keyword did this customer come through. You don't get that data really. It's getting better, but it's just really hard for Google to tell you which one actually bought the product on Amazon. But Amazon, you get the whole, everything is tied in. So start there. Then I would move with brand headline ads, and then maybe product display ads. So start with the initial internal ads. Then DSP is a good platform. What DSP does is, I don't know the formal name of DSP, but it's commonly known as DSP.
Display.
The display. It goes and it targets your customer. So somebody comes into your listing, doesn't end up buying, but they really like your product. They might have not been the right time. They got interrupted. They had to go to work, whatever it was. So then they leave, and then they're on Google. If you show your product, and then they're on YouTube. If you show your product, they'll be like, oh, I forgot about buying this one. Let me go and buy it. Amazon will do that for you. It'll go and retarget your customer out of the platform, and that, to us, we've gotten phenomenal results there. But those only move the needle 10-20%, right? Because the vast majority of the customers have not discovered you yet. So those are the ones you have to target. So start in that sequence, right? And then DSP, and then last I would go off platform. But until you don't get to 25 units a day, I wouldn't go past maybe the first 2 ad platforms. It's not. You're gonna spread yourself too thin.
Okay, so you've talked about classical pay-per-click sponsored products, or does that for you also include sponsored brands? Should brand
Yes.
owners, in your
So,
opinion, start with both in the beginning?
no, it starts sponsored products and then sponsored brands. Those two you can start like almost in parallel, but like maybe to spend the first 7 days just in sponsored products and then start sponsored brands. There are different ways of thinking. One is more copy brand driven. The other one is more like direct response driven from an advertiser perspective. You're gonna learn a lot from both because they both give you the keyword reports. What I mean by learn, by the way, is just get the search and report, see what people are searching. The auto matches on Amazon are getting phenomenally good. Like we would run an auto campaign and we would run a manual. The manual would always beat the auto. Now it's really hard to beat the auto. Like so, what that means to the seller is you don't need to have a lot of expertise to run a good campaign. Obviously, over time you should be more manual and be more, have more intent. But it's a really good way to begin, and then you get the search term report and you start to learn. Amazon auto, essentially, Amazon tries to guess what keywords to bid and how much, and they're doing a really good job at it. So I would recommend that early days.
Cool, thank you. Coming to the next question, and I think partly this has been covered, but maybe you can go a little bit more into detail. So someone was asking, is it better to go for a niche product on Amazon or pick a product that is already high in demand?
It's a bit of a, because it's not black or white, right? So like when I talk about a ham, is a ham a niche product or is it a high demand product? Right? But when you talk about an organic, ethically sourced, natural ham, is that a niche product? It's still ham, but it's also a niche product. So I would go for that example that I just gave you, right? Is a category that's big and proven because that means you can add value at scale, and that's the beauty of Amazon. Like you're not going on Amazon to sell to two of your friends. You're going on Amazon to reach 20, 30, 30, hundreds, maybe thousands of people a day. That's the goal. So go after big categories that have high demand, but have a unique take on that category. So if everyone's selling smoked ham, don't sell smoked ham unless you have a, maybe it's smoked and sweet. I don't know, like, right? You have to have your own take on that category, your own approach, and that has a different who in the background. Remember when I say start with a customer, the person that buys smoked ham is not the same person as the one that buys organically sourced ham, right? So think about it that way. Um, um, niche categories can sometimes be very enticing because like, oh, these are often like short-term categories, like the fidget spinner type. Those are like, you can add value there, but it's very short-term. So I would, and competitors always arrive. So I would think about your take on a big demanded category as the best way to get the best of both worlds.
Okay, got it. Now coming to the last and my favorite question from the audience is one of them asked, I would be interested in hearing from the seller which mistakes they did that could easily be avoided.
That I always say it's so clear in my head because you don't forget the big mistakes. Don't spread yourself too thin. It's like don't play tennis, golf, football, badminton all at the same time. They're different sports, because my mother still thinks that all e-commerce is the same, right? And my friends still think that all Amazon is the same. And e-commerce is all very different. And even within Amazon, it's the tools are very different. The PPCs are very different than DSP, right? So focus, and only until you've maxed out and exhausted and mastered that skill, don't go to the next one. Right? Until you don't win the Wimbledon and PPC for your niche or for your product, don't move on to the next one because you're going to be bad at both. There's so much to learn. There's so many little intricacies. That's the biggest mistake. I remember like initially when we launched our product, we wanted to make our website, we wanted to do Facebook ads, we wanted to do Google ads, and we also wanted to go retail, and we wanted to go Amazon. Like it was sitting in front of us all the time. It was like Amazon. We sell more on Amazon today than we would have dreamed to sell on retail, even on a week. Like it's just like, so I would say don't spread yourself too thin. It's huge out there. So even if you're good in a very small subsection of things, the results are still going to be very big.
One step after the other.
Yes.
Cool.
Otherwise you go crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Santi and everyone. this was it already. This was our second out of 3 interviews we are hosting together with Santi of the brand Supporty Bag. So if you found this interesting, please join also our third and last interview session, which will be hosted on March 16th. So in some weeks' time. Hannah will also share the registration link with you in the chat, so you can directly register in case you haven't done so already. And then I would say, see you there. I would give it a little bit of time for you to click the link. But yeah, thank you, Santi, for taking the time, and talk to you next time.
Thank you, Jana. A pleasure as always.
Yeah, thank you. And for everyone again, the information that you can find more brand owner related content on Seller University. So you can access it via the performance tab, clicking on Seller University, many information on selling on Amazon topics, brand registry, building your brand, advertising your brand, protecting your brand, fulfillment by Amazon, and much more. So feel free to have a look. And see you again in some weeks. Bye.